Some events in history sound so bizarre that if they weren't documented, nobody would believe they ever happened. We like to think we understand the past, that it follows some kind of logic, some predictable arc of cause and effect. But every so often you dig into the historical record and you find something that stops you completely. Something so bizarre, so improbable, so utterly impossible sounding that your first instinct is to assume someone made it up. People in a medieval town dancing uncontrollably for days on end, unable to stop, unable to explain why. A modern military deploying soldiers with machine guns against birds and losing. A government agency spending millions of dollars turning a house cat into a living surveillance device. These aren't legends. They aren't myths. They are documented, verified, historical fact. Today, we're going to walk through some of the strangest true stories in recorded history. Events so improbable that they sound like fiction, but aren't. We start in the summer of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire. It began with one woman. Her name was Frau Trophäa, and one July morning she walked into the street and began to dance. Not for celebration, not for any occasion. She simply danced, and she could not stop. By the end of the week, 34 people had joined her. Within a month, the number had swelled to around 400. They danced for days. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Some reportedly died from heart failure or sheer physical breakdown. Local authorities, baffled and desperate, actually tried to cure the affliction by providing a stage, musicians, and more space, believing that the dancing needed to run its course. It didn't help. What caused the dancing plague of 1518 remains genuinely debated. Some historians believe a fungus in contaminated rye grain may have caused hallucinations. Others believe it was a form of mass psychological panic spreading through the town, a collective response to famine, disease, and extreme stress. And then, just as mysteriously as it began, the dancing stopped. No one fully knows why it started. Yet, as strange as that sounds, history has even more unbelievable stories. In 1932, the newly formed nation of Australia declared war. Not on another country, on birds. Specifically, on emus. After World War I, thousands of Australian veterans had settled in the wheat-growing region of Western Australia. By 1932, roughly 20,000 emus had migrated into the area, decimating crops and causing widespread agricultural damage. The government's solution was military intervention. Soldiers armed with Lewis guns were deployed to the region with orders to cull the population. What followed was one of the most humiliating military campaigns in modern history. The emus, it turned out, were surprisingly resilient and frustratingly difficult to kill. They scattered when fired upon, moved in small, unpredictable groups, and seemed largely unbothered by the gunfire. Soldiers burned through ammunition at a staggering rate for minimal results. The commanding officer reported that the emus could face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. After several weeks, the military quietly withdrew, leaving the emus undefeated. To this day, it stands as one of history's most extraordinary military defeats. If an army losing a war to birds sounds unbelievable, what the CIA tried next might be even stranger. During the height of the Cold War, American intelligence agencies were desperate for new methods of surveillance. The result was a classified program called Operation Acoustic Kitty, a project that genuinely attempted to turn a domestic cat into a living, breathing spy device. The plan involved surgically implanting a microphone in a cat's ear canal, a small radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin antenna woven through its fur. The cat would be trained to sit near targets, foreign diplomats, officials at the Soviet embassy, and transmit their conversations. The CIA spent nearly $20 million trying to turn a house cat into a spy. The first field test reportedly ended almost immediately when the cat wandered into traffic. By 1967, the CIA quietly abandoned the entire project. A declassified memo from the time concluded, with remarkable understatement, that the concept was not practical. Not every strange historical event involves governments making questionable decisions. Some of them simply happen. On October 17, 1814, in the St. Giles neighbourhood of London, a vat at the Moo and Company brewery ruptured. The resulting chain reaction tore through the facility, releasing a wave estimated at over 100,000 gallons of beer into the surrounding streets. The flood tore down 2 houses, damaged a nearby pub, and killed 8 people, most from drowning. The surrounding neighbourhood, one of the poorest in London, was submerged in several feet of dark porter ale. It is, by any measure, one of the strangest industrial disasters in history, and it was entirely real. There are strange events, and then there are moments that simply defy comprehension. In 1969, engineers did something almost unthinkable. They turned off Niagara Falls. For several months, one of the most powerful waterfalls in the world simply stopped flowing. Workers walked across the dry rock face. Tourists gathered to watch. It remains one of the most surreal engineering achievements of the 20th century, not because of what was built, but because of what was paused. But some stories go beyond the strange. They enter territory that feels almost impossible to explain. On January 26, 1972, a Yugoslav Airlines flight broke apart at 33,000 feet over Czechoslovakia. Every passenger and crew member died, except one. Vesna Vulovic, a flight attendant, fell roughly 10,000 meters inside a section of fuselage and survived. She was found in the wreckage, alive, with a fractured skull, broken vertebrae and both legs broken. She recovered. She went back to work. She held the Guinness World Record for the highest fall survived, without a parachute, for decades. There is no scientific consensus on how she survived. Under normal circumstances, survival should have been impossible. And then, there is Tsutomu Yamaguchi. On August 6, 1945, Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first atomic bomb was dropped. He survived. Severely burned and injured, he returned home the following day, to Nagasaki. On August 9, 1945, the second bomb fell. Yamaguchi survived that too. He lived until 2010, passing away at the age of 93. He is the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both atomic bombings. The odds of surviving both bombings are almost impossible to calculate. And finally, Mehran Karimi Nasseri. In 1988, an Iranian refugee arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. Due to a complicated series of bureaucratic and legal circumstances, he was unable to leave the terminal. So he stayed. For 18 years, Nasseri lived in Terminal 1, sleeping on a bench, eating airport food, reading and waiting. He became something of an institution. His story inspired Steven Spielberg's film, The Terminal. He eventually left in 2006, when his health required hospitalization. He had spent nearly 2 decades in an airport, not because he wanted to, simply because the paperwork never resolved. Here is what these stories share. None of them were supposed to happen. None of them fit neatly into the way we expect the world to work. And yet, every single one of them did. We tend to think of stranger than fiction as a phrase that means something is almost true, just barely plausible. But history suggests the opposite. The most unbelievable stories aren't the ones someone invented. They're the ones that no one would have thought to invent, because they were too strange, too specific, too improbable to imagine. Because sometimes, reality is stranger than anything we could ever invent. And sometimes, the most honest thing you can say about the past is simply, this happened. We don't fully understand why, but it happened.